began like any other sleepless night. The hum of the refrigerator in the next room, the rhythmic tick of the wall clock, and the dim orange glow from the street lamp outside, all blended into the quiet symphony of 3 a.m. insomnia. Jordan lay wide-eyed in bed, one arm behind their head, the other scrolling mindlessly through their phone. The apartment was small, one of those post-war buildings with thin walls and creaky floors that made even silence sound alive. Somewhere below, a neighbor's TV murmured faintly, a soft drone beneath the night stillness. The insomnia had been getting worse. Every night Jordan found themselves awake longer, watching the world sleep without them. It was precisely 3:17 a.m. when the sound came. A knock. Not loud, not frantic, but distinct. 3 sharp taps on the apartment door. Jordan froze. The phone's light cast a pale reflection across the ceiling, pulsing with the tremor in their hand. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe one of those half-awake tricks the mind plays when it's deprived of rest. But then, it came again. 3 deliberate knocks, each spaced evenly, as though whoever was outside wasn't in a rush. The sound seemed to reverberate through the old wood, traveling straight through Jordan's chest. There were only 4 units on that floor. Jordan knew all the neighbors. Mrs. Patel, the quiet widow in 3B. Derek, the college kid who smoked on the fire escape. And the couple in 3A who argued more than they slept. None of them would knock this late. Jordan slipped out of bed, careful not to make the floorboards groan. They moved toward the door, each step measured. The peephole offered a warped fisheye view of the empty hallway. Just the yellowed wallpaper and the humming fluorescent light flickering near the stairwell. Nobody there. Jordan waited. Nothing. Then, as they turned to retreat to bed, the knocking came again. This time from the window. The apartment was on the 3rd floor. There was no balcony, no fire escape outside that window, just 3 stories of brick and open air before the alley below. Jordan's heart hammered in their chest, each thump echoing in their ears. The window was half covered by a set of cheap blinds, swaying gently from the faint breeze of the ceiling fan. The sound had come from behind them, a soft, precise tap-tap-tap against the glass, like someone using their fingernail. When Jordan finally gathered the nerve to peek through the blinds, they saw nothing but the empty night and the dim reflection of their own face. They stared for a moment too long, until the reflection blinked back. Morning arrived with a weak, gray light. The world outside continued as though nothing strange had happened. Birds on the power line, the hum of early traffic, the smell of burnt coffee. Jordan hadn't slept a minute. They sat at the kitchen table, eyes red, replaying the night's events in their mind. Was it exhaustion? Hallucination? The reflection had looked like them, but not quite. The angle of the jaw, the shadow under the eyes, something had been wrong. As Jordan left for work, they noticed 3 faint fingerprints on the outside of the window pane, too high for anyone to reach without a ladder. And faintly, from the stairwell below, came the sound of knuckles tapping, once, twice, 3 times. The day after the knocking, Jordan couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every reflection, the bus window, the glass door at the office, even the stainless steel surface of the coffee machine, seemed to echo that distorted version of their face from the night before. By late afternoon, their head throbbed from lack of sleep, and their eyes felt gritty and raw. Coworkers commented on how pale they looked. Rough night? One asked half-jokingly. Jordan just smiled, but their mind replayed the knock, the window, and those impossible fingerprints. When they returned home that evening, the hallway outside their apartment was unusually quiet. Even the familiar hum of Mrs. Patel's incense diffuser had stopped. Jordan paused by Mrs. Patel's door, apartment 3B. The faint scent of sandalwood lingered, but the light beneath her door was dark. Mrs. Patel was in her 60s, soft-spoken, and always left her radio on through the night. That radio's muffled chatter had always been a comfort, a reminder that someone else was awake too. But tonight, silence filled the entire floor. As Jordan slid their key into their own lock, a whisper of movement caught their ear. A creak from inside Mrs. Patel's apartment, slow, rhythmic, like the sound of someone pacing. Then came the soft scrape of her peephole cover moving. Jordan's breath hitched. They turned their head just in time to see the shadow under her door vanish, as if someone had stepped back quickly later that night. Jordan sat on the couch. Every light in the apartment turned on. The clock read 11:48 p.m., and for once, they were too afraid to sleep. They decided to distract themselves, maybe watch something mindless, eat something heavy enough to dull their nerves. But as they opened the fridge, they froze. The hum was gone. The refrigerator, normally an old, buzzing nuisance, had stopped entirely. The entire apartment felt drained of sound. Then came it again, 3 knocks. Not from the door this time, but the shared wall between their apartment and Mrs. Patel's. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, evenly spaced. Jordan's hand trembled as they reached toward the wall. When they pressed their ear against the plaster, a voice, faint and rasping, whispered from the other side. "Don't open it again." Jordan stumbled backward, heart pounding. The voice was unmistakably human, but weak, like it was being filtered through layers of air and dust. They grabbed their phone and considered calling someone. The police, the landlord, anyone. But a mix of embarrassment and fear of not being believed stopped them. What would they even say? My neighbor's wall just told me not to open something? Instead, Jordan decided to check on Mrs. Patel in person. They stepped into the hallway, the old floorboards moaning underfoot. Mrs. Patel's door was slightly ajar. From inside came the faint crackle of a radio, static, and the smell of incense, stronger now, cloying, like it had been burning for hours. Jordan hesitated, then gently pushed the door open. The lights inside 3B flickered dimly. The living room was a small, cluttered shrine of faded photographs and half-burned candles. The radio sat on a table, whispering static through broken speakers. But there was no sign of Mrs. Patel. Instead, in the middle of the room, the carpet was torn open, as if someone had pried up the boards beneath. A small square hole yawned there, dark and old, lined with wood that looked much older than the rest of the building. Inside, just visible in the shadows, were 3 deep scratches carved into the floorboards, wide apart, like the marks of fingers clawing from below. The radio hissed louder, and Jordan could swear, just for a moment, that the static whispered their name. Jordan crouched by the edge of the torn carpet, the smell of incense and dust stinging their nose. The hole wasn't large, maybe 2 feet across, but deep enough that the light from the flickering lamp couldn't quite reach the bottom. The boards around it were splintered, warped, and blackened as though scorched by something old and wet. Every instinct screamed to leave, to run back across the hall and lock their own door, but curiosity clung harder than fear. Mrs. Patel was still missing, and that whisper, "Don't open it again," gnawed at the edges of Jordan's mind. They leaned closer, listening. For a moment, nothing but the low hum of the radio. Then, faintly, from the darkness of the hole, a breath. The sound was unmistakable, slow, ragged breathing, too rhythmic to be the pipes or the settling building. Jordan's stomach twisted. "Mrs. Patel?" They whispered, though their voice cracked halfway through. The breathing stopped. Silence poured through the apartment, thick and absolute. Jordan's flashlight beam quivered as they shone it into the hole, revealing wooden joists, spider webs, and something else. A strip of faded red cloth snagged on a nail. It looked like part of a sari, the kind Mrs. Patel always wore. Jordan's throat went dry. They reached toward it, the edge of their fingers brushing the cloth, when a hand shot out of the darkness and grabbed their wrist. Jordan screamed and stumbled backward, slamming against the wall. The flashlight clattered to the ground, its beam spinning wildly around the room. The hand, pale, dirt-caked, and trembling, retreated back into the hole. The breathing started again, faster now, gasping like something suffocating beneath the floorboards. Jordan's pulse thundered in their ears. They wanted to flee, to call someone, but their legs refused to move. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the sound stopped. From the radio came a sharp burst of static, then a voice, calm, distant, unmistakably Mrs. Patel's. "It's not me, Jordan. Don't look again." The power flickered once, then went out entirely. Darkness swallowed everything. Jordan's phone light became the only glow in the room, a cold blue halo trembling in their shaking hands. The air felt wrong, heavy, damp, and vibrating with something unseen. Jordan edged backward toward the door, eyes locked on the hole. They caught movement there, but it wasn't human anymore. The shape that slowly rose from beneath the boards seemed to shimmer between shadow and flesh, its limbs unnaturally long, its head tilted as though studying the room. In its place, where the hole had been moments ago, the boards began creaking upward, shifting on their own, as if something below was pushing through. Jordan bolted for the door. They didn't remember getting back to their apartment. Only that one moment they were in 3B, and the next, they were slamming their own door shut, locking it 3 times over. The walls felt thinner now, almost breathing with them. From somewhere beneath the floor came a low, rhythmic tapping, slow, patient, and deliberate. Jordan sank to the floor, clutching their knees to their chest, trying to steady their breath. Through the wall, a faint voice whispered again, hoarse and pleading, "You let it out." Then silence. But when Jordan dared to glance toward their window, they froze. Outside, on the third-floor glass, were 3 new fingerprints, longer than before. Sleep was no longer an option. Hannah's nights had become long vigils, spent waiting for the voices to begin. Even when she finally drifted into uneasy dreams, she woke drenched in sweat, her mind echoing with fragments of whispers she couldn't forget. The scratches on the wall gnawed at her, daring her to pull more wallpaper aside. But something in her gut told her not to, not yet. Instead, she resolved to learn more about the building itself. If someone had vanished here, if the last tenant left without warning, there had to be more stories. Secrets like this didn't hide forever. She started with the public library. The building was old enough to appear in city records, and she spent the afternoon flipping through brittle newspapers and yellowed maps. Buried among mundane reports of renovations and zoning disputes, she found a thin column from the late 1970s. The headline read, "Tenant dies in mysterious fall." A man had been found in the stairwell, neck broken, though neighbors insisted they'd heard no struggle. The article quoted a widow from the third floor who claimed she had heard voices in the walls the night before the accident. The details sent a chill crawling down Hannah's spine. This wasn't new. It had been happening for decades. Later that evening, she returned to the apartment with a pounding headache and a growing sense of dread. The elevator was out of order again, forcing her to take the stairs. As she passed the basement door, she noticed it had been left ajar, the padlock dangling loose as if someone had pried it open. Curiosity overrode fear. She descended the narrow steps into a space that smelled of dust, mildew, and something faintly sweet, like rotting fruit. The basement was filled with old furniture and discarded boxes, a graveyard of forgotten lives. Near the far wall, a cabinet stood slightly open, its drawers stuffed with brittle paper folders. Inside were old tenant files. Most were mundane, rental applications, payment receipts, but as she sifted through them, Hannah noticed a pattern. Several folders ended abruptly, with tenants marked as moved out, but with no forwarding address, no deposit returned. A few were crossed out in red ink, their names scrawled over so violently the paper tore. Her stomach twisted when she found the file for the man in the article, the one who had disappeared 2 years ago. His paperwork ended mid-page, the handwriting rushed, as though someone had interrupted while filling it out. A faint brown smear stained the corner of the page, brittle and flaking under her fingertips. The sound of footsteps froze her where she stood. They were slow, deliberate, descending the basement stairs one by one. Hannah's breath caught as the cabinet door creaked open wider, as if nudged by an unseen hand. She crouched behind a stack of boxes, pulse hammering in her ears. The footsteps stopped halfway down the stairs, lingering. Silence pressed in, broken only by the faint rattle of the pipes above. Then came a whisper, stretched thin but clear enough to chill her marrow. "We know you're here." Jordan stood frozen in the corner, flashlight quivering in their grip. The air under the bed shifted again, slow and deliberate, as if something enormous was turning its head. The beam of light trembled across the floorboards, illuminating the last wet footprint that disappeared into the black space beneath. "It's not real," Jordan whispered to themselves, voice breaking. But even as they said it, a low, wet breathing answered, a sound too close to deny. It wasn't animal. It wasn't human. It was both, something in between, as if the walls had learned to breathe and were practicing in secret. The smell was unbearable, damp soil, iron, and the faint sweetness of incense gone stale. Jordan forced their shaking knees to bend, lowering themselves until their flashlight beam sliced beneath the bed frame. Dust gathered in heavy drifts. A single slipper, lost weeks ago, lay half-buried there. Then, movement. A pale hand, the same one they'd seen reaching from Mrs. Patel's floor, slid into view. It wasn't reaching for Jordan this time. It was feeling its way along the underside of the mattress, tracing the slats as though searching for a way through. Jordan gasped and pulled back, the flashlight clattering against the floor. The hand froze. Then, slowly, the mattress began to lift from one side. Not by much, just enough to show that something underneath was pushing upward. Panic took over. Jordan ran for the door, but it slammed shut on its own, the lock twisting with an audible click. They turned, heart pounding, and saw the flashlight beam rolling across the floor, its light catching the edge of a face beneath the bed, their own face. Pale, wide-eyed, and wrong. The reflection from the window the other night hadn't been a trick, it had been this. This thing. It stared up at them, expression twitching like a puppet learning to smile. "You shouldn't have looked," it rasped, in Jordan's own voice but lower, warped. Then it began to pull itself out, not crawling, but folding through the wood as though the floor itself bent to let it pass. The lights flickered, every bulb stuttering in time with Jordan's pulse. The air grew colder. Jordan stumbled backward, tripping over a chair, barely catching themselves before hitting the wall. The thing was half out now, limbs too long, skin the color of damp paper. Its eyes reflected light like glass. It dragged itself forward, bones creaking, one hand gripping the foot of the bed as it whispered, "You opened her floor, so now it's yours." The walls began to ripple, faint impressions pressing outward. Fingers, faces, something pressing to escape. Every breath Jordan took echoed in the room as if mimicked by unseen lungs. A sudden silence. The creature stopped, its head tilted, as if listening to something Jordan couldn't hear. It smiled again, then whispered, "It's almost morning." The words echoed softly. Then it collapsed, body folding in on itself, melting back beneath the bed like wax under flame. Jordan stood motionless, listening. The city outside was waking. Car engines, voices, the sound of birds. The light of dawn crept slowly through the blinds, painting long lines across the floor. But where the footprints had been, now there were handprints, pressed into the wood, all pointing toward the closet. And from inside the closet came a faint, rhythmic tapping, 3 times. The next morning, Megan convinced herself she'd overreacted. Cruises had security cameras, trained staff, and plenty of people around. Surely she wasn't in any real danger. Still, as she made her way to the breakfast buffet, she couldn't shake the memory of the slow, deliberate knock on her door. The corridor outside her cabin seemed longer than usual, lined with identical doors that gave no hint of the people behind them. 2 uniformed crew members passed her, speaking softly in a language she didn't recognize. As they walked by, she noticed one of them glancing over his shoulder at her. Not just a quick glance, but a long, assessing look, as though measuring her reaction. Breakfast should have been a comfort. Sunlight pouring through panoramic windows, the clatter of plates, the smell of coffee and fresh pastries. But Megan's attention kept snagging on small details. A waiter refilling water glasses seemed to be lingering at her table just a beat too long. A young couple at the next table whispered rapidly to each other and kept glancing toward the entrance. And when she finally stood to leave, she caught sight of the man from the night before, the one in the dark suit, seated alone near the back. His hands were folded neatly on the table, his plate untouched. He didn't blink when their eyes met. This time, Megan didn't wait to see if he would vanish. She turned and left. She decided to spend the afternoon exploring the ship. Deck 7 had several quiet lounges and a library that smelled faintly of old paper despite the ocean air. In the library, she struck up a brief conversation with an older British woman named Helen, who was knitting in the corner. When Megan mentioned seeing a man in a dark suit, Helen's needles paused mid-click. "Tall, thin, doesn't eat?" Helen asked, her voice low. "I've seen him too. 3 years ago, on this very ship. Different cruise. He was watching people then as well." Before Megan could ask more, another passenger entered, and Helen's demeanor instantly brightened, as if she hadn't said anything at all. That evening, Megan noticed a change in the ship's atmosphere. The wind picked up, rattling the glass doors on the outer decks. The hallways seemed dimmer, shadows stretching farther than they should. She passed a security camera mounted above the stairwell and had the sudden, irrational feeling that it wasn't connected to anything at all. Back in her cabin, she locked the door and tried to distract herself with a movie on the tiny wall-mounted TV. Halfway through, the screen flickered, briefly showing what looked like live footage of the ship's exterior decks at night. In the grainy image, a lone figure stood at the railing, unmoving, staring out at the sea. She shut off the TV, her heart pounding. The ship's engines throbbed beneath her feet, steady and relentless. But she couldn't shake the growing sense that the ocean majesty wasn't just carrying her across the Caribbean. It was carrying something else, something that didn't belong among the living. The dark liquid spread across the hallway floor in slow rivulets, congealing at the edges of the door. Derek knelt beside it, flashlight trembling in his hand. "It's not blood," he whispered, touching it with a tissue. "It's cold." The stain shimmered faintly, like oil under streetlight. Jordan's stomach turned. "Don't touch it." But before they could stop him, Derek pressed his fingers to the floor, and the knocking stopped. The silence that followed was so heavy it hurt. Then, from inside the apartment, they heard footsteps, slow, careful, pacing just beyond the threshold. Whoever was in there moved like they were mimicking how a person should walk. "Someone broke in," Derek whispered, backing away. But Jordan shook their head. No one broke in. Their voice was hollow, certain. The sound behind the door stopped again. Then, slowly, the handle turned. The latch clicked, and the door creaked open just an inch. Through the sliver of darkness, Jordan saw something pale, a reflection of themselves, eyes wide, skin gray-blue like it hadn't felt sunlight in days. "Close it," Derek hissed, but Jordan couldn't move. The figure smiled faintly. "I've been waiting," it said in Jordan's voice, each syllable echoing slightly out of sync, as if spoken twice. Derek slammed the door shut, pressing his back against it. What the hell was that? Jordan was trembling, hands pressed to their temples. "It looks like me. It is me." Derek stared, breathing hard. "Then where's the real you standing?" The question made Jordan freeze. For the first time, they realized they could still hear the faint hum of the reflection, that same sound of breathing they'd heard beneath Mrs. Patel's floorboards. "It's from the mirror," Jordan said, voice shaking. "It's been crossing over." Derek backed away. "You're saying that thing came out of your reflection?" Jordan nodded slowly. "No, I think it came from below." The hallway lights began to flicker again, buzzing with static. The walls seemed to pulse faintly, as though the building itself had a heartbeat. Derek muttered, "We need to leave." But the stairwell at the end of the hall looked different now, longer somehow, as if the distance had stretched. The flickering light revealed something written along the walls in faint, oily streaks. "We see you." The air felt thick, heavy. A door creaked open behind them. Jordan's again, but this time, the voice that came from inside didn't sound like either of them. It was deeper, slower. "One of you is mine," it said. They ran. Down the hall, past the flickering lights, past Mrs. Patel's sealed door. The building seemed to warp as they moved, walls bending, door numbers repeating, shadows shifting where no light touched. When they finally reached the stairwell, the door was already open. The wind howled from below, smelling of damp wood and something old, like soil turned after years of stillness. Derek glanced back. "It's following us," he gasped. Jordan looked and saw their reflection standing at the end of the hall, smiling, its hands pressed flat against the walls as if feeling its way forward. Then, softly, it raised one hand and waved. The gesture wasn't friendly, it was final. The stairwell groaned like something alive. The further they descended, the colder it grew, the air thick with the smell of damp plaster and rust. The concrete walls dripped with condensation that gleamed under the thin beam of Derek's flashlight. "These stairs shouldn't go this far down," he muttered. "There's only 3 floors." But the steps kept winding lower and lower, the sound of their shoes echoing in a hollow chamber that shouldn't exist. Jordan ran their hand along the wall, fingertips brushing across something carved into the concrete. Small grooves that formed repeating patterns. 3 lines. Always 3. The deeper they went, the less the stairs resembled the building above. The wallpaper ended, replaced by raw stone. Pipes vanished, replaced by long, sinewy roots breaking through the ceiling like veins. The air felt ancient, heavy with the weight of things buried too long. Then they heard it again, the faint tap-tap-tap that had haunted Jordan since the first night. Only this time, it wasn't from the walls or the floor. It came from ahead. Derek swung his flashlight toward the sound and caught the shape of a door at the base of the stairs, massive and wooden, covered in carvings of hands and faces pressed outward as if trying to escape. In the center, 3 knocks echoed back, as though answering their arrival. "Don't open it," Derek whispered, but Jordan was already moving closer. "It's the same door," they said. "The one Mrs. Patel warned me about." The carvings pulsed faintly under the light, their edges glistening with something wet. A soft breath of air escaped through the cracks, carrying the faint scent of incense and rot. Derek grabbed Jordan's arm. "We should go back." But Jordan's expression was blank, almost entranced. "It's been calling since that night," they murmured. "I think it wants to finish what she started." The door shuddered, dust falling from the frame. Then, from behind it, came a voice that froze them both, Mrs. Patel's. "Jordan," it whispered. "It's hungry." Derek stumbled back, shaking his head. "That's impossible, she's gone." But Jordan was already reaching for the handle. "She's not gone," they said, voice trembling. "She's below." The door handle was cold, not metallic cold, but the chill of stone kept underground. As their fingers closed around it, a ripple passed through the air, a vibration that made the walls seem to breathe. Derek shouted, grabbing Jordan's arm, trying to pull them back, but the door yawned open on its own, slow and heavy. The smell that poured out was unbearable, decay and incense, and something faintly metallic. The stairwell lights flickered once. Then, from the darkness beyond the door, a dozen pale hands reached out. They screamed as the hands seized their clothes and hair, pulling them forward. Derek tore free, dragging Jordan back with all his strength. The door slammed shut, the echo shaking dust from the ceiling. The silence that followed was total, until a whisper seeped through the crack. It wasn't Mrs. Patel this time. It was Jordan's own voice. "You can't shut it forever." Derek stared at them, wide-eyed. What the hell was that? Jordan didn't answer. They were staring at their own hand, trembling, and covered in faint, soot-dark fingerprints that weren't their own. As they turned to climb back up, the walls around them pulsed once, releasing a low groan like a sigh. The building had woken up. They climbed back toward the upper floors, but every landing looked wrong. The numbers on the doors were repeating, 2A, 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 over and over, each slightly more distorted than the last. Paint bubbled on the walls, and the air pulsed with a low hum that made their teeth ache. "We didn't go up," Derek said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're still going down." Jordan turned slowly, staring at the stairwell they'd just ascended. It stretched above them now like a tunnel that bent back into itself, the light swallowing its own source. Then, somewhere below, the heavy wooden door creaked open again. The sound wasn't just a noise, it was felt. The floor trembled as though something massive had taken its first breath in years. The low vibration coursed through the walls and floorboards, up through Jordan's bones. "It's open," they whispered. Derek looked down the stairs. A faint reddish light glowed there, faintly pulsing. "No," he said. "We closed it. We closed it." But as they watched, the light began to crawl upward, washing across the steps like slow-moving fog. It wasn't just light. It carried shadows within it, shapes that moved and twisted like figures walking through smoke. Then came the voice. Hundreds of whispers, all speaking at once, overlapping into a single phrase. "We are what you left behind." Paragraph 3. The light reached them, flooding the hall in a crimson haze. Jordan staggered back, covering their face. The walls began to ripple again, but this time, they weren't just moving, they were shedding. Layers of plaster fell away, revealing dark, wet surfaces beneath, like the inside of something alive. The floorboards under their feet softened, giving slightly with every step. Derek's flashlight flickered, sputtered, and died. In the half-darkness, the outlines of doors began to appear along the hallway. Dozens of them, identical, none of which had been there before. Behind each, faint breathing could be heard. "It's the same room," Jordan whispered. Over and over. A reflection that never stops. Something moved at the far end of the hall. The figure stepped into view, Jordan's reflection again. Only now its eyes were completely black, its body flickering like a film reel stuttering between frames. It smiled, and when it spoke, its voice was layered, Jordan's, Mrs. Patel's, and something else beneath. "You wanted to see what's real," it said softly. "Look." The floor split open. Beneath the boards, a vast pit yawned, filled with countless faces, pale, half-formed, whispering in unison. Jordan stumbled backward, clutching their head as the voices rose into a single soundless scream. Derek shouted something, but the noise swallowed his words. Then the reflection reached out, and Jordan felt the floor give way beneath them. They fell. Not far, but deep. The world bent around them, the fall slowing until they landed softly on something that felt like earth, warm, pulsing, alive. A faint red glow lit the vast space around them, walls made of layered wood and flesh, moving with the rhythm of breathing. In the center stood Mrs. Patel, or what was left of her body sunken, her eyes glassy, her hands pressed to the ground as though praying. "It feeds on us," she said, her voice hollow. "Every reflection, every night we stare into the dark, it watches. And one day it crosses." She lifted her face slowly toward Jordan, smiling faintly. "It's already wearing yours." When Jordan opened their eyes, the air was still, thick with dust and the copper scent of rain. They were lying in the middle of their apartment floor. Morning light, pale, uncertain, leaked through the blinds. For a moment, everything felt normal. The hum of the fridge, the city outside. But then Jordan noticed the silence underneath it, a hollow stillness that didn't belong. Derek was gone. The front door stood wide open, the hallway beyond swallowed by shadows, though it was bright outside. "Derek?" they called out, voice trembling. No answer, only the faint sound of breathing. Not theirs, but something in sync with their heartbeat, echoing from the walls. They staggered to their feet and caught their reflection in the mirror by the kitchen. At first, it was just them, pale, exhausted, pupils wide from fear. But as they stared longer, the reflection's expression shifted. Its lips began to curve upward, slow and deliberate. The eyes darkened, and then it blinked, before Jordan did. The realization hit like a knife. This wasn't the same reflection anymore. It was watching, studying. Behind the mirror, faint movement rippled, as if something were pushing forward against the glass from the other side. "You brought me out," it whispered. Jordan stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. The reflection smiled wider. "Now you stay where I was." They turned and ran for the hallway. The apartment door slammed shut behind them, sealing with a sound like concrete grinding. The corridor stretched impossibly long, lit by that same sickly red glow that had haunted the stairwell. The wallpaper was peeling, breathing. Jordan sprinted toward what looked like the exit sign at the far end, but with every step, the door seemed to move further away. The floor pulsed beneath their feet, and then they saw them. Every tenant, every person who had vanished from the building, standing silently along the corridor walls. Eyes open, unmoving. Each one had the same faint smile, and each face was wrong, subtly warped, like something had sculpted them from memory but forgotten the finer details. Jordan screamed Derek's name again, and one of the figures twitched. His face turned toward them, Derek's, but not. The eyes were solid black, the mouth moving soundlessly, lips forming the word, "Stay." The reflection's voice echoed inside Jordan's skull. "Every mirror, every shadow is a doorway. You look too long. You open one." They stumbled backward, tripping over something soft, Mrs. Patel's shawl, lying in the middle of the floor. Beneath it, etched into the tile, were those same 3 carved lines. The building groaned, the walls swelling inward, like the entire place was inhaling. Then, suddenly, everything went still. The hallway, the lights, even the whispering, gone. Sunlight broke through the blinds. Real sunlight this time, warm and gold. Jordan gasped, blinking against it. They were standing at their window again, looking out at the street below. People passed by. Cars honked. The world had resumed. Maybe it had all been a dream. Then their phone buzzed, a notification. A photo message. It was from Derek. The image showed Jordan sleeping in their bed, taken from the foot of it. Beneath the picture, a message. You didn't close the door. Jordan's breath caught in their throat. Slowly, their gaze drifted back to the window. In the glass, their reflection stood perfectly still, except for one thing. It was smiling. And then, softly, there came a knock at the door. 3 times 3:17 a.m.